Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I hope you are enjoying the videos. For more insight on HR practices and real corporate world exposure, please subscribe to our channel, like the video and do share it with others. Also, please press the bell icon to never miss an update from HR Success Talk. Thanks a lot. Enjoy this video.
Hi guys, today's session is what is the role of HR and specifically HR business partners during a crisis like COVID. The pandemic has been around for more than a year now. How has HR responded to this situation, or ideally at least how we should be preparing ourselves for a similar crisis in future, right? So what we'll do is we'll quickly run through the critical stages of any crisis management and how to manage it probably a little better. How do we respond to any crisis for that matter? What can HR do in a typical crisis situation? And then finally, what can HR and HR business partners have been doing, very, very effectively over the last 1 year or so? What has been our learnings? What we can do better? What have been be doing more effectively, and can look forward to a much more evolved crisis management capability, so to say. So typically how crisis management is looked at: a pre-crisis, actual crisis happening and be responding to it, and the post-crisis situation management, and then monitoring and preparing for the next crisis a little better. Typically how disaster management models work. But once we have a type of crisis that has gone by, it's always better to prepare ourselves for a more standard or a more templatized crisis management, so to say, to start responding and not reacting, right? There's a clear difference between how we react and how we respond. Reaction is without much thought. It's always just in time management situation, whereas response clearly is a more rational, more thought out and more informed way of decision making. Okay? Typically how we look at reaction versus response. So in a pre-crisis phase, we need to start looking at what kind of risks are there, and then categorize them as high risk, medium risk, low risk, and then accordingly plan and keep our preparations ready. We need to create a core team of crisis managers, have a basic hierarchy of one, probably a president, general secretary, chief crisis manager, and then volunteers always ready. If you see, for example, the typical fire drill that happens, now fire doesn't come around in office buildings every day, right? But as the crisis management team, it's our responsibility and our accountability to be on our toes, and hence fire drills need to happen, if not every month, at least every 2 months, so that people are also mentally agile to respond to that situation rather than react and start taking the lift, running to the stairs, pushing people, right? It's a more practiced and structured way to manage that particular crisis situation. If we do that, then during the crisis, we are a little more better placed to respond and hence manage the situation rather than running through the situation, right? Once we have done that, we have a team, we have been managing it well. Once the crisis is over, then during the post-crisis, we can review what went well, what didn't go well, probably do a SWOT analysis, what we could have done better, pros and cons, rate them probably, and then look at what was top, medium and low priority for us. Some low priority we did quickly because they were low hanging fruits for us. Probably would have been better if we would have invested that time into managing something more critical. Those are pointers that come out in these stages and can be managed a little better. How can we manage a crisis situation, right, is aptly represented in the image or the illustration on the right hand side, it's very easy to panic, and panic sets out a mob mentality typically. That's exactly what good crisis managers would probably do. They'll first put a stop to panic, put a stop to stress and rumors that probably will go out. And for that, the first pointer here, effective and appropriate communication. The moment we get to know there's a crisis, the first thing that we do is be honest, be upfront, clearly set roles and responsibilities between the crisis management team. If you don't have a team, quickly set up a team, divide roles, put people on the job, get them on the ground and manage the situation rather than letting the situation creating havoc about us. Then is if you are a little better prepared in terms of at the pre-stage, then what will happen is you'll start anticipating what's to come. And if you have started anticipating things a little better, your responses by default should be proactive of managing or putting that palm in between falling blocks so that the non-affected part or in the whole piece, the affected part is the least, and rather than the entire block of these bricks probably falling down, figuratively speaking. We need to have balanced and honest reactions, as I said. Even if you are unable to respond, and if it's a reaction, at least the reaction should be well balanced. It should not be seen as if we are taking the high road, so to say. We are favoring certain people and kind of being biased to others. We are taking advantage of certain situation and ignoring some things. Those clear things should be avoided at all times. Right? And finally, of course, the best way to manage a certain thing going forward is to have a clearly scientific and quantitative tracking and monitoring process. Okay? Now, how as HR do we manage a crisis? And if you see very clearly, we have the toughest part of managing employee expectations and business expectations. Right? The employee will need XYZ, the business will need ABX. What do we do about the Y and Z? Right? So that's where a model has been developed where if we look at both these sets of needs and start managing things in a way where we clearly set hygiene goals, right? And then we set the next level of priority for us in terms of how to ensure people are retained, right? And there's not a mass exodus happening at any given point in time. How are people taking advantage of their goals? Are they aligned enough in this current crisis situation? Have we tried to ensure that we mix and match and merge and move people in a way that at least at this point in time, we can take maximum advantage of the situation. Right? And then finally, of course, we look at that in the current limited and constrained environment, how best can we make people grow? If we can ensure that the employee expectations and needs can match what the business has to offer, or if we clearly know what the business has to offer and then ensure that, or at least convince the employee set to accept that current situation, then we can marry expectations in a much better way in the current crisis situation, right? I think that's typically what has happened, of course, in the COVID, the pandemic scenario also. Just to give you an example, right? These are two clear surveys that came out. One was done by PCMA in the Southeast Asian market, and in April 2020. In April 2021, ENY did a much larger survey, but what the left says is largely about what the employee expectation was. The right by EY is what employers and employees together figured out how are we moving towards the post-pandemic phase and how we can manage it much better. Now, if you see, only 25% of the people across geographies said that we probably will be unaffected, even in this pandemic and post this pandemic, whereas largely all the others, were either laid off or they were furloughed or probably asked to go on long leave. And probably the best case scenario was salary reduction in that sense, where you save your job, you have salary coming in at least, even if it is at a lower base. To cut to April 2021, when people were asked of what has COVID done to you in the last 12, 14 months, 60% of the employers said that it has affected us negatively and extensively. They've used the word extensive distress. Closely, the number is pretty close, where employees also agreed that the COVID actually has affected us extensively. But most interestingly, 59% of employers and employees both agreed that we are still not ready to manage such pandemics, because we may be physically trying to manage things, but the so to say the intangibles, the mental setup, the behavioral changes, the mindset shift that has to happen has yet not happened. So even if my salary is set back, I have been working from home for the last 1.5 years. Right now, I'm being called back to office. I think a lot of us are reading the articles now. People expect to leave their jobs rather than go back to office, which is clearly a mindset shift that is happening. And that's what, as HR business partners, we need to manage. This is the roadmap as we speak, and the 4 R's, as they're calling it, the 4 R's of COVID: reaction, resilience, recovery, and the new reality. And over a period of last 14, 16 months, this is the percentage of employers and employees that are settling into the new phase. So across, there are about 4% organizations which are still fighting on a day-to-day basis, reacting to a crisis, right? And we saw that we need to respond and not react. 39% of organizations and people in those organizations have developed high resilience, and they're trying to cope much better in this situation. 18% actually have recovered, and they're trying to figure out a way how to quickly move into the new phase or the new normal, as they're calling it. Now, as HR business partners, I think these are the 4 R's that we need to clearly keep in mind and work towards ensuring the quicker we move from a reaction phase into a recovery mode, the easier for us the new reality will be. And hence, for HR business partners in COVID and going forward in any other pandemic, I think what they should clearly look at is faster, clearer, and timely communication, which is frequency based, could be daily, could be, a lot of organizations do daily catch-ups with the organization, 15 minutes, but they inform. Some organizations do it weekly, you may do it fortnightly, whatever, but should happen. You have to rebuild trust and empathy with people, because with remote working situations, trust and empathy is something that is dwindling. Managers are not very sure whether the team is working. Teams are very unsure how will my manager rate my performance and productivity. Right? So that needs to be balanced well. Lot of hygiene to medium to very good to have processes and policies will need to change. So, for example, health, safety and environment policy, travel policies, basic attendance and working conditions policy, leave policies, diversity. The more remote working situation happens, which means an organization is open to hire someone in a tier 2 or tier 3 city who's good enough, and that could turn out to be someone who's physically challenged. It doesn't matter. Now that we are working from home and his or her home environment is suited for him or her to perform, to the best, how does it matter where they are now, right? So diversity policies need to change. And of course, as I said, by default, the better your tracking and monitoring parameters are, you are in a much better situation to manage any other pandemic going forward, right? So that's pretty much largely, covering the responsibilities and response metrics of HR and HR business partners during COVID or any crisis for that matter. Thank you so much.